And the problem people have is when you sign your oath of office to be a congressperson, it's very clear that your first interest is the interest of the United States. And people took issue with the fact that she is talking to Somalians, even if they are American Somalians, about an issue that's happening in Somalia with non-US citizens in a non-US territory. Congresswoman Ilhan Omar is once again surrounded by controversy, this time because of a speech that she gave to a congregation of Somalian people. She is a first or second generation America from Somalia. She is very proud of that fact. She talks about it a lot. She represents a part of the country where there's a dense population of Somalians. And last week, she gave a speech that was translated. Now, there was some controversy because she came out and said that was not translated well. So what we're going to look at is what Congresswoman Ilhan said is the most accurate translation. Just to be as fair as we can possibly be, there was a viral clip going around of the actual video, and then someone had subtitled it, but she claims that that was really slanted in its interpretation. So this is one, it's on X, you can look it up. It is by @Analyst Somalia, and she has put her stamp of approval on this translation. And so let's look at it together to see what the controversy actually is. She says, "We Somalis are people who love each other. It is possible that some of us are rough with each other, but when the going gets tough, we are people who have each other's backs. We are sisters and brothers supporting each other, people who know they are Somalis and Muslims coming to each other's aid and abiding their brothers and sisters. And the other day, when we heard that some Somalis, or those who say they are Somalis, entered an MOU with Ethiopia, many people called me and said, 'Ilhan, you should talk to the U.S. government. What is the U.S. government going to do about this?'" And so here's really the crux of the controversy. She said, "My response was the U.S. government will do what we ask it to do." Now, the we is Somalians. We should have this confidence in ourselves as Somalis. We live in this country. We are taxpayers in this country. This country is one where one of your daughters sits in Congress. While I am in Congress, no one will take Somalia's seat. The United States will not back others to rob us. So do not lose sleep over that, oh Minnesotans. The lady you sent to Congress is on this, and she is as cognizant of this interest as you are. So especially that first part, here's my response. The U.S. government will do what we ask it to do. People are really up in arms about this. At least one other person has called for her to be censured in Congress, which is a pretty big deal. Practically, it doesn't mean a ton, but it is a big deal. And the problem people have is when you sign your oath of office to be a congressperson, it's very clear that your first interest is the interest of the United States. And people took issue with the fact that she is talking to Somalians, even if they are American Somalians, about an issue that's happening in Somalia with non-US citizens in a non-US territory. And what's happening is there's kind of this independent republic that has carved itself off, and it looks like they're going to be recognized as an actual country or an actual province called Somaliland. And people are up in arms about this, and she's saying, look, I'm in the US government, and they're going to do what we want. And they're going to protect our seas, and they're going to make sure that no one takes advantage of us. And so I'm here and I'm representing you. And so people are calling this Somalia first agenda, which is kind of, a contrast of the buzz phrase that's very big right now, which is the America first agenda. Is this as big of a deal as people are making it out to be? My answer probably isn't going to be that satisfying, but I think yes and no. On the practical side, the reason I think it's a big deal is because you have to know who your first team is. Who is your first team? This is something I've always practiced in my own leadership, including with my staff at MetaChurch, where I'm the lead pastor. The idea of first team is understanding the prioritization within any given framework of where your ultimate loyalty lies and the filter through which you make decisions. And the way first team works under my leadership is whatever team you sit on that has the highest scope of the organization, that has to be your first team. The problem when you reverse that, let's say you have someone who sits on an executive leadership team, and then they also manage one of your specific ministry teams. If that specific ministry team is their first team, then what ends up happening is that ministry team becomes siloed as their leader fights first and foremost for one team that's just a fractional piece of the larger organization. Instead, if their highest level of leadership is their first team, then the way they make decisions for the team they manage will be with the scope of the entire organization in mind. In other words, if everyone understands their first team, then yes, they manage their individual roles and their individual contributions well, but they manage it through the lens of what is best for everyone holistically in the organization. When you don't do this, this is how you end up with a very fractional and siloed organization where the finance team only worries about themselves and self-protects and fights for what they want, not for what's best for everyone. And then your audiovisual team fights for what they want, and everyone tries to pull as many resources as they can, whether they need them or not, because they're self-protecting and they're siloed. They don't have a bigger vision of what's best for your organization. This functions in the family as well. When you have a family, you and your spouse have to be the first team. And we've all probably seen the damage when someone sides with a kid over their spouse. I mean, there is no faster way to create dysfunction in a home. Maybe there's some faster ways, but man, that is a fast way for you to take the kid's side over your spouse's side. You have to know who the first team is, and together you keep a holistic vision of what is best for your family altogether. And then when you deal with your kids, you're making decisions with your kids that benefit the entire family. This also should work in government. And so when you take an oath of office to the United States, listen, if you're a first or second generation immigrant, you're going to care about your home country. I have spent time just doing mission work on the island of Haiti, and I care deeply about Haiti, deeply about it. So I can understand. I mean, if you're an immigrant from Somalia, now you're in the US Congress, if you have the capability to make things better for your country of origin, you should do it, but it has to be done in proper priority. And so your first team is to the United States of America. The same fractional siloed thinking could happen even at the congressional level. If your very first priority is Minnesota and Minnesota alone, there is a hypothetical scenario where a congressperson does something that seems beneficial for their direct representatives that actually is damaging to the larger American experiment. And so you sit with the 500 and however other many Congress people, and you make decisions and you represent your people well. And the people you represent are the people who voted you in, who are American citizens from the state that you come from. And so this is an issue. It's an issue of prioritization. It's an issue of misplaced loyalty at some level. Now, I said also, is it a big deal? Yes and no. And here's my no. And this isn't the most positive view of the government, but I do think it's a realistic view, which is people's loyalties are screwed up left, right, up, and down. The problem is much bigger than one congresswoman who goes to some constituents and throws them some red meat, like all politicians do, to say, I got your back and I'm going to do what you need and you better believe I'm on your side, which maybe or maybe is not true because politicians just lie like they're breathing. The other problem is the politicians are supposed to represent the people, but we know that more than anything, they represent special interests. And so potentially Ilhan Omar sees her country of origin as a special interest that is getting an undue amount of her prioritization. But the same is true with hundreds and hundreds of other politicians, with the pharmaceutical industry and the military industrial industry, with big banks, these people who fund their campaigns and then demand things in return. All of the lobbyists who are going in and getting legislation passed that does not help you at all. In fact, it costs you lots of tax dollars in order to do something to pay back the big companies who sent the lobbyists who got you in office. And so look, the problem of prioritization is much deeper than just one person prioritizing their country of origin. Is it a problem? Yes. Do we have many other problems? Yes. Matthew 6 is very interesting because there's a lot that Jesus says in there. It's part of the Sermon on the Mount about prioritization. temptation. For example, he says, no one can serve two masters. Either you will hate the one and love the other, or you'll be devoted to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve both God and money. In Matthew 6:33, he reminds us as believers, but seek first God's kingdom and his righteousness, and all these other things, the things that you need, will be given to you as well. As believers, our first team is us and Jesus. That's our first team. And it makes sense, even just on a practical level, because your first team is whatever has the highest scope and the broadest view. And there is no grander vision for your life, and there's no higher view of reality than what God offers us through Jesus. And so you and Jesus, that's your first team above everything. That's all the other priorities. And if we get that right, then we have a good chance of getting all of the other tiers of prioritization correct as well. If you enjoyed this clip, make sure you check out the full podcast and subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with all new content. You can also support the channel at patreon.com/Clayton Tyner. Link is in the description below.